The bright orange violation notice stuck to my mailbox like a neon scar against the weathered wood. I stared at it, my fingers trembling as I peeled it off. The words Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association glared back at me, bold and accusatory. My heart sank. I had no idea what this was about, but something about the way it was worded, cold, impersonal, and final, made my stomach churn. I unfolded the paper, my eyes scanning the list of violations. Unapproved vehicle storage, unsightly agricultural equipment, failure to maintain property aesthetics. Each accusation felt like a slap in the face. My family had lived on this 15-acre farm for generations. My great-grandfather had built this place with his bare hands in 1932, long before the first McMansion of Willow Creek Estates had been erected. And now, some HOA was telling me what I could and couldn't do on my own land. I crumpled the notice in my fist and tossed it onto the kitchen table. My daughter, Lily, was sitting at the table, her small hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate. She looked up at me, her big brown eyes filled with concern. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft and hesitant. "Nothing, sweetheart," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just some paperwork. Don't worry about it." But I was worried. Deep down, I knew this wasn't just about a piece of paper. Something about the way that notice had been delivered, like a warning shot, felt ominous. I didn't know it then, but that orange slip of paper was the first domino in a chain of events that would unravel a criminal conspiracy stretching across 3 counties. The sound of tires crunching on gravel pulled me from my thoughts. I looked out the kitchen window and saw a tow truck rumbling down our long, dusty driveway. My heart leapt into my throat. The truck's yellow lights flashed in the early morning sun, casting long shadows across the fields. "Dad, what's happening?" Lily asked, her voice rising in panic. "I don't know, honey," I said, already moving toward the door. "Stay inside." I stepped out onto the porch, the cool morning air biting at my skin. The tow truck had come to a stop near the old Winnebago that had been parked in the same spot for over 30 years. My grandfather's RV. The one he'd driven us to Yellowstone in when I was just a kid. The one that held so many memories of family trips and lazy summer afternoons. A skinny man with a patchy beard hopped out of the tow truck and began wrapping chains around the RV's front axle. I felt a surge of anger and fear as I ran toward him. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted, my voice echoing across the open fields. The man barely looked up. "Just doing my job, sir. Got orders to remove this vehicle." "Orders from who?" I demanded, stepping between him and the Winnebago. "This is private property. My family's owned this land for 4 generations." The man shrugged and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association," he said, handing me the paper. "Says here you got 3 notices already." I snatched the paper from his hand, my eyes scanning the text. Sure enough, it had my name and address at the top, along with a list of violations I'd never seen before. The signature at the bottom made my blood boil. Evelyn Montgomery, HOA president. "This is insane," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm calling the sheriff." The tow truck operator shrugged again. "Suit yourself, but I got proper papers. You can take it up with the HO while your RV sits in our impound lot. That'll be $200 a day, plus the $200 a day, plus the $500 towing fee." Just then, another car pulled up, a shiny white Mercedes with custom Willow Creek Estates plates. Out stepped Evelyn Montgomery herself, dressed like she was heading to a business meeting instead of a dusty farm. Her perfectly styled hair didn't move in the breeze, and her red-painted lips formed a smile that never reached her eyes. "Mr. Turner," she said sweetly, clicking across the gravel in her high heels. "I see you've finally been forced to address our concerns." "What concerns?" I shot back, my voice rising. "And since when does your HOA have any say over my family's farm?" Evelyn pushed her designer sunglasses up her nose. "Perhaps you should have read the notices we've been leaving. Your property may have once been separate, but your access road was incorporated into our jurisdiction during last year's expansion." The board voted unanimously. Lily tugged at my sleeve, her small voice trembling. "Dad, they can't just take Grandpa's RV, can they?" "No, honey, they can't," I assured her, though doubt crept into my mind. Something wasn't right. My neighbor, Diane Wilson, must have seen the commotion. She hurried across the road, still wearing her gardening gloves. "James, don't let them take anything. she said, her voice urgent. They tried the same thing with my husband's boat last week. Evelyn's plastic smile hardened. Mrs. Wilson, your property is also in violation. We'll be addressing the next. We never joined your HOA, Diane fired back. You can't just decide our farms are suddenly part of your fancy neighborhood. I turned to the tow truck driver. Look, there's clearly a misunderstanding here. This is private property, and I never signed anything agreeing to HOA rules. You need to unhook my RV right now. The man hesitated, looking at Evelyn for direction. The paperwork is in order, she insisted. The RV is an eyesore, visible from our community entrance. It affects property values for all 35 homes in our development. I pulled out my phone again. I'm calling Sheriff Mercer. He's known my family for decades. Let's see what he has to say about this. Evelyn's confidence wavered for just a moment. Fine, she said, her voice tight. We'll pause today, but you have 72 hours to move that monstrosity out of sight, or we'll be back with proper enforcement. Proper enforcement? I echoed. This isn't your property. She handed me an official-looking document with gold seals. Check the county records, Mr. Turner. Section 5, Paragraph 3 clearly outlines the new boundaries. As the tow truck operator reluctantly removed his chains from my RV, Evelyn leaned closer. 3 days, Mr. Turner. And while you're at it, you might want to address the peeling paint on your barn and those unsightly farm implements. There are children in our community now. We have standards to maintain. With that, she strutted back to her Mercedes, leaving me standing in my own driveway, clutching paperwork I didn't understand and making promises to my daughter I wasn't sure I could keep. As Evelyn and the tow truck drove away, Diane stepped closer. James, this isn't random, she said, her voice low. Robert Johnson's tractor disappeared yesterday. Maria Gonzalez found her boat gone this morning. Something bigger is happening here. I stared at the dust settling on the driveway. The RV was safe for now, but time was running out. How could land that had been in my family for almost 100 years suddenly fall under the control of a neighborhood that didn't even exist 3 years ago? And what would they try to take from us next? The next few days were a blur of research, phone calls, and sleepless nights. I spent hours poring over old property maps and legal documents, trying to find a way to fight back. My neighbor, Tom Williams, a retired history teacher, helped me dig through county records. What we found was shocking. The HOA's claims were based on a technicality, an easement agreement my grandfather had signed in 1976, allowing a neighboring farm to use our driveway. Somehow, Evelyn Montgomery and her cronies had twisted that old agreement to claim jurisdiction over our entire property. But we weren't alone. More and more neighbors began to come forward, each with their own story of harassment and theft. Robert's tractor, Maria's boat, the Patel's camping trailer, all taken under the guise of HOA violations. It was clear that this wasn't just about enforcing rules. This was about forcing us out. With the help of Detective Reynolds and Officer Martinez, we set a trap. We parked Robert's prized 1965 Ford pickup in plain sight, knowing it would draw Evelyn's attention. That night, as the tow trucks rolled in, we were ready. The floodlights blazed, turning night into day. The police moved in, catching Evelyn and her crew red-handed. The look on her face as the handcuffs clicked into place was something I'll never forget. The fallout was swift. Evelyn Montgomery was arrested, along with her husband and several members of the HOA board. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Fake documents, forged signatures, and a ledger detailing their illegal profits. As the news spread, more victims came forward. It turned out that Evelyn had been running the same scam in 3 different counties, targeting properties on the edges of developments and using the HOA as a cover for her crimes. In the end, we got our RV back, along with Robert's tractor, Maria's boat, and everything else that had been taken from us. But more importantly, we got our land back and our peace of mind. As I sat in the Winnebago with Lily, planning our first camping trip in years, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. We had stood our ground, not just for ourselves, but for our community, for the land that had been in our families for generations. Sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about saving an RV or a tractor. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most, your freedom, your family, and what's right. And as the sun set over the fields, casting a golden glow on the old Winnebago, I knew that we had done just that. The arrest of Evelyn Montgomery and her associates sent shockwaves through Willow Creek Estates and the surrounding communities. News vans lined the road leading to my farm, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like strange, mechanical flowers. Reporters clamored for interviews, their microphones thrust in my face as I tried to go about my daily chores. Mr. Turner, Mr. Turner, how does it feel to take down a criminal HOA ring? One reporter shouted, her voice piercing through the morning air. I paused, leaning on the handle of my shovel. It feels like justice, I said simply, before turning back to my work. I wasn't interested in being a hero. I just wanted my life back. But life wasn't going back to normal anytime soon. The arrest was just the beginning. As the investigation deepened, more and more people came forward with stories of harassment, intimidation, and theft. It seemed that Evelyn's reach extended far beyond our little corner of the world. Detective Reynolds and Officer Martinez were relentless. They combed through mountains of paperwork, uncovering a web of corruption that stretched across 3 counties. Evelyn's husband, Stanley, was arrested for his role in the illegal towing operation, and several members of the HOA board were charged with conspiracy and fraud. The media dubbed it the HOA scandal, and for a while, it seemed like the story was everywhere. But for me, the real story wasn't about the arrests or the headlines. It was about the people, my neighbors, my friends, my family, who had stood together to fight for what was right. With Evelyn and her cronies behind bars, the residents of Willow Creek Estates were left to pick up the pieces. The HOA board was dissolved, and a new election was held. To everyone's surprise, Diane Wilson, my neighbor and one of the first to stand up to Evelyn, was elected as the new president. Diane's first order of business was to reach out to the surrounding farms and properties that had been targeted by the old HOA. She organized a community meeting, inviting everyone to come together and discuss how to move forward. The turnout was overwhelming. The community center was packed with people, their faces a mix of hope and apprehension. Diane stood at the front of the room, her voice steady and strong. "We've been through a lot," she began, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But we've also learned a lot. We've learned that when we stand together, we can overcome anything. And we've learned that a community isn't about rules and regulations. It's about people." The room erupted in applause. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were all on the same side. As the new HOA worked to rebuild trust and transparency, the legal battles continued. Evelyn and her co-conspirators faced a mountain of charges, from fraud and conspiracy to theft and harassment. The trial was long and grueling, but in the end, justice was served. Evelyn was sentenced to 15 years in prison, her husband to 10. The other members of the HOA board received varying sentences, depending on their level of involvement. The judge's final words echoed through the courtroom. This was not just a crime against property. It was a crime against people, against families, against communities. And for that, there must be consequences. As the gavel came down, I felt a sense of closure. But I also knew that the scars left by Evelyn's actions would take time to heal. With the legal battles behind us, life on the farm began to return to normal, or as normal as it could be. The Winnebago was back in its spot near the barn, its faded orange stripe catching the afternoon light. Lily and I spent our weekends working on it, fixing it up for our first camping trip in years. The neighbors came together to help each other rebuild. Robert got his tractor back, and Maria her boat. The Patel's camping trailer was returned, and we all celebrated with a community barbecue, the smell of grilled meat and laughter filling the air. But the biggest change was in the way we saw each other. The experience had brought us closer, forging bonds that went beyond property lines and fences. We were no longer just neighbors, we were a community. As the seasons changed, so did the land. The fields turned golden with the harvest, and the trees blazed with the colors of autumn. Life on the farm was good, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had been given a second chance, a chance to do things differently. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the porch with Lily, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. She leaned against me, her head resting on my shoulder. "Dad," she said softly, "do you think Grandpa would be proud of us?" I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "I think you would be very proud, sweetheart." We stood our ground, and we protected what matters most. She nodded, her eyes closing as she drifted off to sleep. I sat there for a long time, watching the stars come out one by one, thinking about the land we stood on and the legacy we were building. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt full of promise. The new HOA was working to create a community that was inclusive and fair, and the surrounding farms were thriving. We had faced down a storm and come out stronger on the other side. As I looked out over the fields, I knew that the fight wasn't over. There would always be challenges, always be people who wanted to take what wasn't theirs. But I also knew that we had the strength to face them together. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about saving an RV or a tractor. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most, your freedom, your family, and what's right. And as the first stars of the night twinkled above, I knew that we had done just that. The months following Evelyn Montgomery's arrest were some of the most peaceful I could remember. The farm felt alive again, as if the land itself had breathed a sigh of relief. The Winnebago, now fully restored, sat proudly near the barn, its orange stripe gleaming in the sunlight. Lily and I had taken it on a few short trips, rekindling the joy of those childhood memories with my grandfather. The community, too, had found its rhythm again. Diane Wilson's leadership had brought a sense of unity to Willow Creek Estates and the surrounding farms. The new HOA was transparent and fair, focusing on building bridges rather than enforcing arbitrary rules. It felt like we had finally turned a corner. But peace, as I would soon learn, is a fragile thing. It started with a stranger. I was out in the fields one afternoon, checking on the irrigation system, when I noticed a black SUV parked at the edge of my property. A man in a suit stood beside it, his arms crossed as he surveyed the land. There was something about the way he carried himself, confident, almost arrogant, that set my nerves on edge. I walked over, wiping the sweat from my brow. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice firm but polite. The man turned, his sharp features breaking into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "James Turner, I presume," he said, extending a hand. "I'm Victor Kane. I represent Devlin Corporation." I shook his hand reluctantly, his grip firm and businesslike. "What can I do for you, Mr. Kane?" He gestured to the fields. "Beautiful land you've got here. Prime real estate. My clients are very interested in acquiring it." I stiffened. "This land isn't for sale." Kane's smile didn't waver. "Everything has a price, Mr. Turner, and my clients are prepared to offer you a very generous one." I shook my head. "This farm has been in my family for generations. It's not just land, it's our home. I'm not interested in selling." Kane's expression hardened, just for a moment, before he smoothed it over with another smile. "I understand. Sentimentality can be a powerful thing. But times change, Mr. Turner. Progress waits for no one." With that, he handed me a business card and climbed back into his SUV. As he drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The next day, a formal offer arrived in the mail. It was from Devlin Corp., a real estate development company I'd never heard of. The number on the paper was staggering, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. But it wasn't just about the money. The letter was filled with veiled threats, suggesting that if I didn't sell, I might find myself facing unforeseen challenges. I showed the letter to Diane and a few of the other neighbors that evening. We gathered in my kitchen, the tension thick in the air. "This is bad," Diane said, her brow furrowed. "Devlin Corp. has a reputation. They don't take no for an answer." Robert, who had been quiet until now, slammed his fist on the table. "They can't just bully us out of our homes. We fought Evelyn Montgomery, and we won. We can fight them too." "But this is different," Maria said, her voice trembling. "Devlin Corp. is huge. They have lawyers, money, influence. How do we fight that?" I looked around the room at the faces of my friends and neighbors. They were scared, but there was also a fire in their eyes, a determination to protect what was theirs. "We fight them the same way we fought Evelyn," I said. Together. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Diane reached out to contacts in the county government, trying to find out more about Devlin Corp. and their plans for the area. Robert and I spent hours poring over property records, looking for any loopholes or legal protections we could use to our advantage. What we found was alarming. Devlin Corp. had been quietly buying up land in the area for months, often through shell companies to avoid detection. They were planning a massive development, hundreds of luxury homes, a shopping center, and even a golf course. And our properties were right in the middle of it. But the most disturbing discovery came from Detective Reynolds. She had been keeping an eye on Devlin Corp as part of a broader investigation into corporate corruption. What she told us sent chills down my spine. Devlin Corp has ties to organized crime, she said, her voice low. They've been using intimidation, bribery, and even violence to get what they want. If they're targeting your land, it's because they see it as a key piece of their plan, and they won't stop until they get it. The first strike came at night. I was awakened by the sound of glass breaking. I grabbed my grandfather's old baseball bat and crept downstairs, my heart pounding. The living room was dark, but I could see the shattered window and the rock lying on the floor. Attached to the rock was a note. It was short and to the point. Sell now, or next time it won't be a window. I woke Lily and took her to Diane's house, not wanting to take any chances. Then I called Detective Reynolds. This is escalating, she said grimly. We need to be careful. Devlin Corp plays dirty, and they're not afraid to hurt people. The next morning, the neighbors gathered at my farm. We were angry, but we were also determined. This wasn't just about protecting our land. It was about protecting our way of life. We formed a plan. Diane would use her connections to rally support from the county government. Robert and I would organize patrols to keep an eye on the properties. And Detective Reynolds would continue her investigation, gathering evidence to bring Devlin Corp down. But we knew it wouldn't be easy. Devlin Corp had resources we couldn't match, and they weren't afraid to play dirty. The fire broke out in the middle of the night. I was on patrol with Robert when we saw the flames. They were coming from the Patel's barn, lighting up the sky with an eerie orange glow. We raced over, but it was too late. The barn was gone, along with most of their equipment. Mrs. Patel stood in the driveway, her face streaked with tears. They warned us, she said, her voice shaking. They said if we didn't sell, they'd burn us out. I felt a surge of anger and helplessness. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was about survival. The fire was a turning point. It galvanized the community in a way nothing else could. People who had been hesitant to get involved now stepped forward, offering their help and support. The media picked up the story, and soon the whole county was talking about the farmers standing up to a corporate giant. Donations poured in to help the Patels rebuild, and volunteers showed up to help with the patrols. But the most important development came from Detective Reynolds. She had finally gathered enough evidence to bring charges against Devlin Corp. The company's ties to organized crime, their use of intimidation and violence. It was all there, laid out in black and white. The final showdown came in court. Devlin Corp's lawyers tried to dismiss the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness took the stand, telling their stories of harassment and intimidation. And when Detective Reynolds presented the evidence of their ties to organized crime, the courtroom fell silent. The judge's verdict was swift and decisive. Devlin Corp was found guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy, extortion, and arson. The company was fined millions of dollars, and several of its executives were sentenced to prison. As the gavel came down, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't known in months. We had won. But more importantly, we had shown that even the smallest among us could stand up to the biggest threats. The months that followed were a time of healing and rebuilding. The Patel's barn was rebuilt, stronger than ever, and the community came together to repair the damage done by Devlin Corp. But the biggest change was in us. We had faced down a corporate giant and won. We had proven that when we stood together, we were unstoppable. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the fields, I felt a sense of peace. The land we stood on was more than just dirt and crops. It was a legacy, a home, and a testament to the strength of community. And as long as we stood together, no one could take that away from us. The victory over Devlin Corp was sweet, but it came with its own set of challenges. The media frenzy that followed the trial brought both attention and scrutiny to our small community. Reporters camped out on the edges of our properties, hoping for interviews with the farmers who took down a corporate giant. While some of us welcomed the spotlight, others, like Mrs. Patel, preferred to keep their heads down and focus on rebuilding. The financial compensation from the lawsuit helped, but it wasn't enough to erase the scars left by the fire and the intimidation. The Patel family, though grateful for the support, still carried the weight of that night. Their barn had been rebuilt, but the emotional toll lingered. For me, the victory was bittersweet. I was proud of what we had accomplished, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Devlin Corp might have been dismantled, but there were always others waiting in the wings, hungry for land and power. Lily, now 12 years old, had grown up faster than I would have liked. She had seen too much conflict, too much loss. But she had also seen the strength of community, the power of standing together. She had become a symbol of hope for the next generation. One evening, as we sat in the Winnebago planning our next camping trip, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes and asked, "Dad, do you think we'll ever have to fight like that again?" I hesitated, not wanting to scare her, but also not wanting to lie. "I don't know, sweetheart. But if we do, we'll face it together. Just like we did this time." She nodded, her expression serious. "I want to help. I want to protect our land too." Her words filled me with pride. The legacy of the farm wasn't just about the land. It was about the values we passed down to the next generation. It didn't take long for the next threat to emerge. A few months after the trial, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from a company called Green Horizon, a sustainable development firm looking to partner with local landowners to create eco-friendly communities. The letter was polished and professional, but it had the same undertones as Devlin Corp's offer. I showed the letter to Diane and the others at our next community meeting. The mood was tense. "Green Horizon?" Robert scoffed. "Sounds like Devlin Corp with a fresh coat of paint." Diane nodded. "They're probably hoping we'll let our guard down because they're talking about sustainability and eco-friendliness. But it's the same game, just a different player." Maria, who had been quiet, spoke up. "What if we hear them out? Maybe they're different. Maybe we can find a way to work with them instead of against them." There was a murmur of disagreement, but I held up a hand. "Maria's right. We shouldn't assume the worst right away. But we also need to be careful. Let's invite them to a meeting and see what they have to say." The meeting with Green Horizon was held at the community center. The room was packed with neighbors, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. The representatives from Green Horizon were polished and professional, their PowerPoint presentation filled with images of lush green communities and happy families. But as they spoke, it became clear that their vision didn't include us. They talked about reimagining the landscape and maximizing potential, but there was no mention of preserving the farms or respecting the history of the land. When they finished, I stood up. "Thank you for your presentation. But I have to ask, what happens to the people who already live here? The farmers who've been on this land for generations?" The lead representative, a woman named Claire, smiled tightly. "Change is never easy, but it's necessary for progress. We're offering fair compensation to those who are willing to sell." "And what about those who aren't?" Diane asked, her voice sharp. Claire's smile faltered. "We're confident that once people see the benefits of our vision, they'll understand the importance of moving forward." The room erupted in angry murmurs. It was clear that Green Horizon wasn't interested in partnership, they were interested in control. After the meeting, the community was more united than ever. We had faced down Devlin Corp, and we weren't about to let Green Horizon steamroll over us. Diane took the lead again, organizing a campaign to raise awareness about Green Horizon's true intentions. We reached out to local media, held town hall meetings, and even started a social media campaign to rally support. But Green Horizon wasn't going to back down easily. They launched their own PR campaign, painting us as backward and resistant to progress. The battle for public opinion was just as intense as the legal battles we had fought before. The turning point came when Lily decided to take a stand. She had been following the developments closely, her young mind grappling with the complexities of the situation. One day, she came to me with an idea. "Dad, what if we show people what this land really means? Not just to us, but to everyone." I was intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" She smiled. "A festival. We can invite people from all over to come see the farm, meet the animals, and learn about our history. We can show them why this land is worth protecting." It was a brilliant idea. With the help of the community, we organized the first annual Harvest Festival, a celebration of the land, the people, and the legacy we were fighting to protect. The Harvest Festival was a huge success. Hundreds of people came from all over the county to experience life on the farm. There were hayrides, pumpkin carving, live music, and even a petting zoo. But the highlight of the festival was the storytelling tent, where neighbors shared their stories and memories of the land. The media coverage was overwhelmingly positive. For the first time, People saw us not as backward farmers resisting progress, but as a vibrant community with a rich history and a bright future. Green Horizons' PR campaign faltered in the face of our grassroots effort. They tried to spin the festival as a last gasp of a dying way of life, but their words rang hollow. The final showdown came at a county zoning meeting. Green Horizon had applied for a rezoning permit that would allow them to start development on the edge of our properties. The meeting was packed, with supporters on both sides. Diane, Robert, Maria, and I all spoke, sharing our stories and our vision for the future. But it was Lily who stole the show. She stood at the podium, her voice clear and strong. This land isn't just dirt and crops. It's our home. It's where my grandpa taught me to fish, where my dad taught me to drive a tractor. It's where we come together as a community. And it's worth fighting for. The room erupted in applause. Even some of Green Horizons' supporters looked moved. When the vote was called, the rezoning permit was denied. Green Horizon withdrew their application shortly after, their plans for the area effectively dead in the water. As the years passed, the farm continued to thrive. The Harvest Festival became an annual tradition, drawing more and more people each year. Lily grew into a strong, confident young woman, taking on more responsibility on the farm and in the community. The legacy of the land, the values of resilience, unity, and determination lived on in the next generation. And as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the fields, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about saving an RV or a tractor. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most, your freedom, your family, and what's right. And as long as we stood together, no one could take that away from us. The years following the defeat of Green Horizon were marked by growth and renewal. The community had not only survived but thrived, becoming a model of resilience and unity. The annual Harvest Festival grew into a regional event, drawing visitors from across the state. It wasn't just a celebration of the land. It was a celebration of what we had built together. Lily, now a teenager, had become a leader in her own right. She organized youth programs, teaching the next generation about farming, sustainability, and the importance of community. Her passion for the land was infectious, and it inspired others to take up the mantle of stewardship. But even as we celebrated our successes, I couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't over. The world was changing, and with it came new challenges. Climate change, economic pressures, and the ever-present threat of corporate greed loomed on the horizon. We had won battles, but the war for the land, and the values it represented, was far from over. The first major challenge came in the form of a storm. It was the kind of storm that only happens once in a generation. The skies turned an ominous green, and the wind howled like a wounded animal. The rain came down in sheets, flooding the fields and threatening to wash away everything we had worked so hard to build. We worked through the night, sandbagging the barns and diverting the water away from the crops. But despite our best efforts, the damage was severe. The fields were waterlogged, the fences were down, and the Winnebago, our beloved Winnebago, had been damaged by a fallen tree. As the sun rose the next morning, revealing the extent of the destruction, I felt a wave of despair. How could we recover from this? But then I saw Lily, her face streaked with mud, directing a group of volunteers with the confidence of someone twice her age. And I realized that we weren't just fighting for the land, we were fighting for each other. The recovery was slow and grueling, but it brought out the best in the community. Neighbors who had once been strangers came together to help rebuild. Donations poured in from across the state, and volunteers showed up in droves to lend a hand. The Winnebago was repaired, its orange stripe repainted to shine brighter than ever. The fields were drained and replanted, and the fences were rebuilt stronger than before. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of community. But the storm had also exposed vulnerabilities. The changing climate meant that extreme weather events were becoming more frequent, and we needed to adapt if we were going to survive. The answer came in the form of innovation. Diane, always the forward thinker, proposed a plan to make the farm more sustainable. She suggested installing solar panels, building rainwater collection systems, and implementing crop rotation techniques to improve soil health. It was a bold vision, but it was exactly what we needed. With the help of grants and community fundraising, we began to transform the farm into a model of sustainability. The solar panels provided clean energy, the rainwater systems reduced our reliance on wells, and the new crop rotation techniques improved yields. It wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving in a changing world. And as the farm began to flourish again, I felt a renewed sense of hope. But just as we were finding our footing, a new threat emerged. A letter arrived in the mail, this time from a company called AgriCorp. They were a massive agricultural conglomerate, and they were interested in buying up small farms to consolidate them into industrial-scale operations. The letter was polite but firm. They offered a generous buyout and promised new opportunities for the community. But the underlying message was clear: sell or be left behind. I called a community meeting to discuss the offer. The mood was tense. AgriCorp, Robert said, his voice filled with disdain. They're worse than Devlin Corp and Green Horizon combined. They don't care about the land or the people. They just care about profits. But what if they're right? Maria asked, her voice trembling. What if small farms like ours can't compete anymore? What if this is our only chance to survive? There was a murmur of agreement, but I held up a hand. We've faced threats before, and we've always come out stronger. This isn't just about survival. It's about preserving our way of life, our values, our legacy. The decision wasn't easy. Some neighbors were tempted by AgriCorp's offer, while others were determined to fight. In the end, we decided to stand our ground, but not alone. We reached out to other small farms in the area, forming a coalition to resist AgriCorp's advances. We called ourselves the Land Guardians, and our mission was clear: to protect the land, the people, and the values that made our community strong. It was a daunting task, but we were united. And as we prepared for the battle ahead, I felt a sense of pride in what we had built and what we were fighting for. The final battle came in the form of a public hearing. AgriCorp had applied for a permit to build a massive processing plant on the edge of our properties. The hearing was packed, with supporters on both sides. Diane, Robert, Maria, and I all spoke, sharing our stories and our vision for the future. But once again, it was Lily who stole the show. She stood at the podium, her voice clear and strong. This land isn't just dirt and crops. It's our home. It's where we come together as a community. And it's worth fighting for. The room erupted in applause. Even some of AgriCorp's supporters looked moved. When the vote was called, the permit was denied. AgriCorp withdrew their application shortly after, their plans for the area effectively dead in the water. As the years passed, the farm continued to thrive. The Land Guardians became a powerful force, advocating for small farms and sustainable agriculture across the state. The Harvest Festival grew into a national event, drawing visitors from across the country. Lily, now a young woman, had taken over the farm, bringing new ideas and innovations to keep it thriving in a changing world. Her passion for the land was a beacon of hope, inspiring others to take up the mantle of stewardship. And as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the fields, I knew that the legacy of the land and the values it represented would live on for generations to come. The story of our farm is more than just a tale of struggle and triumph. It's a testament to the power of community, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring legacy of the land. As long as we stand together, no challenge is too great. And as long as we nurture the seeds of tomorrow, the land will continue to flourish, not just for us, but for generations to come. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about saving an RV or a tractor. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most: your freedom, your family, and what's right. And as long as we stand together, no one can take that away from us. The victory over AgriCorp marked the beginning of a new chapter for our community. The Land Guardians, once a small coalition of local farmers, had grown into a statewide movement advocating for sustainable agriculture and the protection of small farms. Our story had inspired others to stand up against corporate greed and fight for their land, their families, and their way of life. But even as we celebrated our successes, I couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was far from over. The world was changing faster than ever, and with it came new challenges: climate change, economic instability, and the ever-present threat of corporate exploitation. We had won battles, but the war for the land and the values it represented was far from over. Lily, now in her early 20s, had taken on a leadership role in the community. She had graduated from college with a degree in sustainable agriculture and returned to the farm with a wealth of knowledge and fresh ideas. Her passion for the land was infectious, and she quickly became a driving force behind the land guardian's efforts to modernize and adapt. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set over the fields, she turned to me with a determined look in her eyes. "Dad, we need to think bigger. We can't just protect our land. We need to show the world that small farms like ours are the future." I smiled, proud of the woman she had become. "What do you have in mind?" She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "A cooperative. We can pool our resources, share equipment, and market our products together. We'll be stronger together than we ever could be alone." It was a bold vision, but it was exactly what we needed. And with Lily leading the charge, I knew we could make it happen. The cooperative was launched with great fanfare. Farmers from across the region came together to share resources, knowledge, and expertise. We invested in new technology, from solar-powered irrigation systems to drones that monitored crop health. We even launched a community-supported agriculture (CSA) program, delivering fresh produce directly to consumers. The cooperative was a resounding success. Our products, grown with care and respect for the land, became highly sought after. Restaurants and grocery stores clamored to carry our produce, and the cooperative's profits were reinvested into the community. But the cooperative was about more than just profits. It was about building a sustainable future, one that honored the legacy of the land and the values we held dear. Just as we were finding our footing, a new threat emerged. A letter arrived in the mail, this time from a company called Global Harvest. They were a multinational agricultural conglomerate, and they were interested in buying up small farms to consolidate them into industrial-scale operations. The letter was polite but firm. They offered a generous buyout and promised new opportunities for the community. But the underlying message was clear: sell or be left behind. I called a community meeting to discuss the offer. The mood was tense. "Global Harvest?" Robert said, his voice filled with disdain. "They're worse than AgriCorp. They don't care about the land or the people. They just care about profits." "But what if they're right?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. "What if small farms like ours can't compete anymore? What if this is our only chance to survive?" There was a murmur of agreement, but I held up a hand. "We've faced threats before, and we've always come out stronger. This isn't just about survival, it's about preserving our way of life, our values, our legacy." The decision wasn't easy. Some neighbors were tempted by Global Harvest's offer, while others were determined to fight. In the end, we decided to stand our ground, but not alone. We reached out to other small farms in the area, forming a coalition to resist Global Harvest's advances. We called ourselves the Roots of Tomorrow, and our mission was clear: to protect the land, the people, and the values that made our community strong. It was a daunting task, but we were united. And as we prepared for the battle ahead, I felt a sense of pride in what we had built and what we were fighting for. The final battle came in the form of a public hearing. Global Harvest had applied for a permit to build a massive processing plant on the edge of our properties. The hearing was packed, with supporters on both sides. Diane, Robert, Maria, and I all spoke, sharing our stories and our vision for the future. But once again, it was Lily who stole the show. She stood at the podium, her voice clear and strong. "This land isn't just dirt and crops. It's our home. It's where we come together as a community, and it's worth fighting for." The room erupted in applause. Even some of Global Harvest's supporters looked moved. When the vote was called, the permit was denied. Global Harvest withdrew their application shortly after, their plans for the area effectively dead in the water. As the years passed, the farm continued to thrive. The Roots of Tomorrow became a powerful force, advocating for small farms and sustainable agriculture across the state. The Harvest Festival grew into a national event, drawing visitors from across the country. Lily, now a young woman, had taken over the farm, bringing new ideas and innovations to keep it thriving in a changing world. Her passion for the land was a beacon of hope, inspiring others to take up the mantle of stewardship. And as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the fields, I knew that the legacy of the land and the values it represented would live on for generations to come. The story of our farm is more than just a tale of struggle and triumph. It's a testament to the power of community, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring legacy of the land. As long as we stand together, no challenge is too great. And as long as we nurture the seeds of tomorrow, the land will continue to flourish, not just for us, but for generations to come. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about saving an RV or a tractor. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most, your freedom, your family, and what's right. And as long as we stand together, no one can take that away from us. The defeat of global harvest brought a sense of peace to the community, but it was a fragile peace. The world was changing faster than ever, and with it came new challenges: climate change, economic instability, and the ever-present threat of corporate exploitation. We had won battles, but the war for the land and the values it represented was far from over. Lily, now in her mid-20s, had taken on a leadership role in the community. She had become the face of the Roots of Tomorrow, traveling across the state to advocate for sustainable agriculture and the protection of small farms. Her passion for the land was infectious, and she quickly became a driving force behind the movement. But even as we celebrated our successes, I couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't over. The world was changing, and with it came new challenges. We had to adapt if we were going to survive. The new challenge came in the form of a drought. It was the worst drought in decades, with temperatures soaring and rainfall scarce. The fields turned brown, the crops withered, and the animals struggled to find water. It was a harsh reminder of the fragility of our way of life. We worked tirelessly to keep the farm alive, implementing every water-saving technique we could think of. We installed drip irrigation systems, collected rainwater, and even experimented with drought-resistant crops. But despite our best efforts, the damage was severe. As the weeks turned into months, the stress began to take its toll. Tempers flared, and the sense of unity that had carried us through so many challenges began to fray. The breaking point came one hot, dry afternoon. I was in the barn, trying to repair a broken irrigation pump, when I heard shouting outside. I stepped out to find Robert and Maria in a heated argument. "We can't keep going like this," Maria shouted, her voice trembling with frustration. "We're losing everything. We have to keep fighting." Robert shot back, his face red with anger. "We can't just give up." I stepped between them, trying to calm them down. "We're all stressed, but we need to stick together. We've faced worse than this, and we've always come out stronger." But my words fell on deaf ears. The drought had pushed us to our limits, and the cracks in our unity were beginning to show. The turning point came when Lily proposed a radical idea. "We need to think bigger," she said at a community meeting. "We can't just rely on the land. We need to diversify. We need to create new sources of income that can sustain us through tough times." She outlined a plan to transform the farm into an agritourism destination. We could offer farm stays, workshops, and educational programs. We could even open a farm-to-table restaurant, showcasing the best of what we had to offer. It was a bold vision, but it was exactly what we needed. And with Lily leading the charge, I knew we could make it happen. The transformation was slow and grueling, but it brought out the best in the community. We worked together to build new facilities, create marketing materials, and develop programs that would attract visitors. The farm-to-table restaurant was the first to open, and it was an instant success. People came from miles around to taste the fresh, locally grown produce. The farm stays and workshops followed, drawing visitors from across the state. The new income streams helped us weather the drought, and the sense of unity that had carried us through so many challenges began to return. Just as we were finding our footing, a new threat emerged. A letter arrived in the mail, this time from a company called EcoHarvest. They were a sustainable agriculture company, and they were interested in buying up small farms to create a network of eco-friendly operations. The letter was polite but firm. They offered a generous buyout and promised new opportunities for the community. But the underlying message was clear: sell or be left behind. I called a community meeting to discuss the offer. The mood was tense. "EcoHarvest," Robert said, his voice filled with disdain. "They're just another corporate wolf in sheep's clothing. They don't care about the land or the people. They just care about profits." "But what if they're right?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. "What if small farms like ours can't compete anymore? What if this is our only chance to survive?" There was a murmur of agreement, but I held up a hand. "We've faced threats before, and we've always come out stronger. This isn't just about survival. It's about preserving our way of life, our values, our legacy." The decision wasn't easy. Some neighbors were tempted by Eco-Harvest's offer, while others were determined to fight. In the end, we decided to stand our ground, but not alone. We reached out to other small farms in the area, forming a coalition to resist Eco-Harvest's advances. We called ourselves the Harvest of Hope, and our mission was clear: to protect the land, the people, and the values that made our community strong. It was a daunting task, but we were united. And as we prepared for the battle ahead, I felt a sense of pride in what we had built and what we were fighting for. The final battle came in the form of a public hearing. Eco-Harvest had applied for a permit to build a massive processing plant on the edge of our properties. The hearing was packed, with supporters on both sides. Diane, Robert, Maria, and I all spoke, sharing our stories and our vision for the future. But once again, it was Lily who stole the show. She stood at the podium, her voice clear and strong. This land isn't just dirt and crops. It's our home. It's where we come together as a community. And it's worth fighting for. The room erupted in applause. Even some of Eco-Harvest's supporters looked moved. When the vote was called, the permit was denied. Eco-Harvest withdrew their application shortly after, their plans for the area effectively dead in the water. As the years passed, the farm continued to thrive. The Harvest of Hope became a powerful force, advocating for small farms and sustainable agriculture across the state. The Harvest Festival grew into a national event, drawing visitors from across the country. Lily, now a young woman, had taken over the farm, bringing new ideas and innovations to keep it thriving in a changing world. Her passion for the land was a beacon of hope, inspiring others to take up the mantle of stewardship. And as I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the fields, I knew that the legacy of the land and the values it represented would live on for generations to come. The story of our farm is more than just a tale of struggle and triumph. It's a testament to the power of community, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring legacy of the land. As long as we stand together, no challenge is too great. And as long as we nurture the seeds of tomorrow, the land will continue to flourish, not just for us, but for generations to come. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about saving an RV or a tractor. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most: your freedom, your family, and what's right. And as long as we stand together, no one can take that away from us. Years later, as I sat on the porch with my grandchildren, watching the sun set over the fields, I felt a deep sense of peace. The farm was thriving, the community was strong, and the legacy of the land lived on in the hearts of those who fought to protect it. Lily, now a mother herself, had taken over the farm, bringing new ideas and innovations to keep it thriving in a changing world. Her children, my grandchildren, played in the fields, their laughter echoing through the air. The Harvest of Hope had become a national movement, advocating for small farms and sustainable agriculture across the country. The Harvest Festival, now a national event, drew visitors from across the world. As I looked out over the fields, I knew that the fight wasn't over. There would always be challenges, always be people who wanted to take what wasn't theirs. But I also knew that we had the strength to face them together. Because sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about saving an RV or a tractor. Sometimes, it's about protecting what matters most: your freedom, your family, and what's right. And as long as we stand together, no one can take that away from us. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.